Welcome everybody to episode 5 of the T3 Alpha Show. My name is Michael Comeau, and I am here with Rob Koyfin, who is the founder and CEO of Koyfin, which is a leading financial data platform with over 500,000 users. Now, Rob, we were talking offline before we got started, where if in 2015 you had come to me and said, I want to build this new financial data platform, I would have said, isn't it a crowded industry? Like, why would you start something like that? So I think we should start there. What made you start Koyfin, and what made you think you could actually stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on this podcast, Michael. Really a pleasure to be here. The kind of genesis of Koyfin and why I started Koyfin is, prior to Koyfin, I was on Wall Street for about 15 years, working on the sell side and the buy side. On the sell side, a number of investment banks, including Goldman and Citi. On the buy side, most recently, at a hedge fund called Techni Capital. I was always using the professional tools available to Wall Street professionals like Bloomberg and FactSet and CapIQ, and then started kind of looking around that if I didn't have access to a tool that cost $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a year, what can I get access to? And there's Yahoo Finance, there's Google Finance, there's the brokerages, but my observation is that there was a huge gulf in between kind of what retail investors had access to and professional investors. And secondarily, just the user interface of these tools hadn't been updated, hadn't been enhanced in 20 years. And so the Yahoo Finance that you were using in 2016 was the same one from 10 years ago, similarly with a FactSet or Bloomberg. And I was kind of looking at all these really interesting things happening in the tech space, including Tableau, that was focused on data visualization. And I thought there could be an element of refresh for these tools that really layered in this kind of graphing data visualization layer on top of the data for investors. So that was sort of kind of my observation about what was the problem, what was possible. And that's what I started building Koyfin because of.
Okay, now, were you looking to compete with anybody in particular, or did you have a vision for Koyfin can be this unique thing?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that there was this really interesting dynamic where in the financial services space, you had kind of retail tools and you have professional tools, and you were sort of one or the other. You have to sort of pick a side. And you didn't really have that in other verticals and other sectors. And so, for example, there's no kind of Excel for professionals versus retail users. There's obviously more security considerations and maybe enterprise features or admin features. But in terms of the product, the availability for an individual was the same thing as the availability for a professional. And so my observation was that these tools like Bloomberg and FactSet and CapIQ have all this capability. Why isn't that available to individuals? And kind of conversely, if you're selling to professionals, why can't you have a freemium model where you build a tool, you give some of it away for free, and then you monetize on kind of more advanced usability, more advanced data? And that was something that was happening in the tech world with Slack and Dropbox and a bunch of other companies that had a freemium model where they had a free product and then charged on top of that. So I thought that if we could create a robust product that people would find useful and give away part of it for free to get people used to the user experience, see if they agreed that the charting and the user interface was better than other products, then we could sell them kind of a more premium version and have that really nice freemium funnel where you don't have to invest in a sales force.
Okay, now, like on your website, it said that you kind of got off to a slow start, and then it seems like you have that hockey stick growth curve that everybody really wants. So what really ignited Koyfin in terms of growth of users?
Well, yeah, it was a slow start because I'd never built software before, and I don't know if you've ever kind of been involved in any software development, Michael, but
nightmare. It's a nightmare. all the kids watching, it's 10 times more complicated and 50 times more expensive than you think. Sorry to interrupt, but I will say this. I know it's way harder than it looks.
We don't call it a nightmare. We call it challenging in our business. It is a nightmare, and it's a nightmare for someone just starting out and never building software before. And so it was really important for me to find the right team that could build the software and really understand what it takes to build software. And so when I was starting out, I just figured that a developer is a developer. Like, it's some functions that you write. How hard could it be? And then that was a very naive view of the world. And kind of in retrospect, it's like me saying a basketball player is a basketball player. Like, who cares if you're in the NBA or you're playing in high school? Like, you're dribbling the ball, you're shooting the ball. Like, how much could there be to this thing, or anything that just requires just many levels of professionalism and just learning. And so it took me a while to really find the team to build the right product. I'd say with us, we always just kept improving and building and trying new things. And when we launched the beta version of Koyfin in 2018, we started getting users right away. And even though when I look back at that product and it was really ugly and just doesn't look anything like it looks today, there were still some things about it that people found useful, like the ability to visualize financial data, the ability to kind of graph different data series versus another. And so that was a really good sign that people found that useful. You can really do that in other platforms like Yahoo or brokerages. And we started kind of building an audience. So it was definitely, it took a while to get going. I'd say we definitely saw some signs of traction early on. And then your question on kind of like what was the catalyst? We were kind of launching Koyfin to the general public around 2020. COVID happened. Everyone started working from home. Everyone started looking at the stock market, and we definitely got a boost into our launch of getting those users. But I'd say today, kind of the engine that keeps Koyfin growing is this freemium model, where we have so many free users on the platform daily, telling other users about it, sharing charts. That drives a really nice growth loop. And so that's probably one of the strongest things that we have going on for Koyfin today.
Okay, so what does your customer base look like? From what I see on the website, it seems like you have a lot of financial advisors, a lot of serious individual investors, but I would say, who makes up the majority of your customers, if there is one group?
Yeah, so we have several different groups. So the biggest group is individual investors, and so those are investors that are just kind of investing for their own account, and those investors could be just professionals. So we have a lot of software engineers that are using Koyfin. Software engineers tend to be more quantitative. They tend to kind of want to figure out problems on their own instead of delegating it to someone else. But we have a ton of individuals in other industries that are using Koyfin. I'd say the other kind of subgroup of individuals we have is former Wall Street professionals that now don't have their Bloomberg or their FactSet and are looking for something a little bit more high powered than kind of your average tool that you get from a broker. So individuals are our largest group. Our second largest group is really kind of in the financial advisor and wealth management space. So this is a group that early on we noticed was a big segment, and we started creating more and more workflows for that segment, which are different than for the individuals. So there's, I'd say, functionality that is geared towards both groups. So for example, looking at news or looking at filings or looking at financials of a company. But then we've created a bunch of unique functionality for financial advisors, like managing a model portfolio or creating a report for a prospect in terms of comparing two portfolios that are really more advisor centric. And so we have kind of 4 paid plans. 2 are for individuals and 2 are for financial advisors.
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring it up, because I'm actually using Koyfin. And by the way, T3 has a Koyfin subscription, and we pay full money for it. They took away my Bloomberg, and I ended up in Koyfin because I think, like a lot of people that were using these high-end platforms, I was only using maybe 0.1% of the features. So I want to dig a little bit under the surface again into why people use Koyfin. Are there any features in particular that users gravitate to, and especially any that surprised you? For example, I use the earnings history, probably my single favorite feature on Koyfin, where you can go, like, you could see a company's last 20 quarters or whatever it is, and whether they beat, how much the stock reacted. But again, like, are there any features that people really love, and have any of them surprised you?
Koyfin is a very robust platform. So a lot of different workflows, a lot of different functionality. Um, Different styles of investors use different features. And so, for example, what you just described in terms of looking at a company's earnings history, we call snapshot. We have about 20 different snapshots to look at either earnings estimates or earnings history or valuation or growth or estimate revisions. And so those snapshots are pretty popular. I'd say different people find different snapshots popular. And so I love the earnings history one. It's something on Bloomberg that I used to love. And so we kind of, let's say, got inspired by that Bloomberg snapshot to create ours. It's called the SURP, Surprise Snapshot on Bloomberg. And so we have something similar, which just basically shows you the historical surprises of a company. Are they beating? Are they missing? By how much over time? And gives you a good sense. Does management sort of tend to beat what they project historically? I'd say the most popular function on Koyfin today is the graphing, is the just the ability to be able to graph and visualize financial data. So if you wanted to visualize revenue or revenue growth or P multiples or inflation or 10-year yields or stock market performance or stock performance over time, it's really easy to graph that, and also very easy to visualize one chart on top of another to just be able to see trends over time. So like one chart that I love looking at is the semiconductor margins and versus the stock price or versus the future return. And that's because semiconductors tend to be cyclical. They're a cyclical industry with supply and demand. And so when there's high demand, supply comes online, and then it gets oversupplied, and then demand kind of comes down. And so you see historically this really nice margin curve over time, and the stock price reacts as you would when kind of like margins are at their peak. That's typically when you want to start selling the stock, and when margins are at their low, that's typically when you want to start buying the stocks. And so you could look at that for a number of companies, like Micron is a great example. So I love just the ability to visualize that sort of data. And then you could do that with macro data or performance data. A lot of our advisors use that charting capability to graph total returns and compare total return of different funds and kind of see how funds perform during certain sell-offs or during certain periods of market rallies. You can graph the portfolio of the performance of a portfolio or model portfolio pretty easily as well. So I'd say that's the kind of the most popular Koyfin feature. And then there's a bunch of other features in the top 10. For example, our screening tool is really popular. So the ability to kind of like screen for different securities. Our watch list tool, the ability to have a watch list of securities, but then overlay any of the 500 data points that we have for stocks, whether it's returns or valuations or revisions, or create your own custom column in a watch list. And then the My Portfolio feature, the ability to kind of keep track of your portfolio with cost basis and really understand your exposure and what you own versus a benchmark, is another feature that's pretty popular.
Okay, so how do you know what to add? Because I'm sure people are writing in saying, you need to have this, you need to have that. And then I'm sure there are things that might surprise you how popular they are. So how do you decide which new features get added to the platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we think about our product roadmap is a little bit of a framework that has to do with how important we think a feature is versus how hard it is to build, versus the risk of kind of building that feature. So kind of the complexity of the feature, of building the feature, and also the risk of us building the feature and it not being successful. So for example, so it's those three pillars. So importance, the way we think about importance is it's a subjective measure, but we think about kind of, is it table stakes in other platforms? Are we getting a lot of requests for it versus via our emails or our users? And then having our own kind of an opinion of, do we think this is going to be impactful for users going forward? And then the other two, in terms of complexity and the risk, is a little bit more subjective. And so we have a way of determining that. But, some features our users are kind of trying to pull it out of us. So for example, over the past 3 months, we released something, alerts, which is kind of table stakes for a lot of platforms. the ability to set up alerts for a price, but also the ability to set up alerts for evaluation. So you could set up different valuation alerts. You could set up alerts for your watch list in terms of press releases or filings. And so that was something that I don't think is very, I'd say it's table stakes versus other platforms. I'd say for us, the way we thought about it is really including some of those other things, not just price alerts, but having valuation alerts and kind of like more of the document alerts, which was interesting. So that was one that was our number one requested feature for about 2 years. And we finally kind of put the resources into building that. And then maybe some other features that are not highly requested that we're building currently are, we're building a kind of like more of a chat GPT inside of Koyfin. So you could just query for different, using different documents and financial data. And so that's not something that people are kind of clamoring for, but something that we think could be really useful. We just released something called transcript summary, where every transcript on Koyfin, every company transcript of the management call, the earnings call, now has a really nice summary. And for the earnings summaries, we have a nice 4-quarter table, which shows you the progression and the trend of certain metrics. And so, we thought that was a kind of a interesting project. We think that the GPT stuff is interesting. It's probably a little bit high risk because we don't have any precedent or anywhere else to kind of look to whether it'll be successful or not. But super exciting in terms of our testing and the potential for these kind of features.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up AI because we also talked a little bit offline before about how inaccurate AI tools can be, especially with financial data. For example, I tried to get ChatGPT to write like an overnight news summary, and it's giving me news from like a week ago, or last week it insisted that the all-time high of the S&P 500 was 4,400 or something like that. So are you concerned about like accuracy and data integrity? Like, is that an obstacle for you?
That's a loaded question. Yeah, for sure. So I think for AI tools in general and what AI is good at, which is sifting through a lot of data, I think investing in a platform like Koyfin is just a perfect match for it. So it doesn't mean that there aren't risks. I think for us, as we are building these tools, it's really important for us to understand what data is being queried. So I think with kind of like Perplexity, if you say like, give me a news summary, a lot of times for like Apple or something, it'll give you a great news summary. But if you ask it for something a little more esoteric, or you ask it maybe for the market, it gets confused. There's, like Perplexity uses the internet as its source. You don't really know what it's querying, right? So if Koyfin writes a blog or somebody writes a blog with some kind of mistake, Perplexity just takes that and just uses that as fact. And so that's an issue. And in investing, it's a problem if you can get 95% of the stuff right and you get 5% of the results with an error. That's not something that's acceptable in investing. You can't just say like, oh, 5% of the data points are going to be incorrect, but who cares if my investment decision is going to lose money? It's only 5% of the time. So that's clearly not acceptable for us. The way we think about it is really using our own data to power kind of that ChatGPT. So for example, using filings and transcripts and press releases, and being able to summarize that. And then you bring up a good point about the weaknesses of LLMs. Sometimes they hallucinate, sometimes they think a number is a different number, or if you ask it to do some logic or math, it doesn't do a great job. So with us, it's really, really important to link back to the source. And so we definitely want to implore our users to take the output of the GPT or LLM and make sure that they're kind of double checking it. And so we want to summarize the conclusions for them. But if there's anything that's kind of important, it needs to be checked with the primary source. And so we always link back to the primary source as a spot check.
But okay, speaking of loaded questions, I have something even more loaded.
Let's do it.
Now, I'll preface this with, we're not giving out political opinions, but I can see at T3 Live's business, the political climate has been hugely beneficial to our business because, we have this weird combination of volatility and upward movement. And so it seems like, interest in the markets keeps growing. So, I mean, do you see the same thing at Koyfin?
Yeah, I'd say I'd say we definitely benefit from more investors wanting to invest in the market. Some subset of those investors will want to do fundamental analysis or think about kind of deeper analysis than just looking at a stock chart, and that's where Koyfin really comes in, and that's where kind of the use case which we're built for. So we definitely see that. I'd say with us, we're a little bit more insulated from kind of the peak and troughs we've seen over the past 5 years with the meme stock mania and then the kind of like pullback and now the growth again, because we do attract a little bit more of a steady base of people who want to be serious about investing and are really putting in the time to kind of longer time horizons and thinking about stocks from a little bit more than just a day. So those are on the individual side, and then on the financial advisor side, the financial advisors are just there's a secular trend of financial advisors leaving wirehouses like Morgan Stanley and UBS and being more independent or hybrid, and that's a really big tailwind for Koyfin in terms of those advisors now needing their own tools to think about investment research and creating portfolios. And so we definitely kind of benefit from more investor interest, from the market going up, from volatility. I know year to date, when I look at kind of like our usage numbers, our biggest usage day was Liberation Day, right, in April, when the market just kind of like puked and we had just a lot of volatility. And that's when people tend to kind of want to understand what's going on with their portfolio, what's happening in terms of any opportunities to buy certain stocks. So we definitely see kind of like some impact, but overall we want to cater to a user base that is a little bit more sticky and not sort of kind of like in one day and out the next.
Yeah, very solid political answer. You might have a future in politics. Yeah,
ask me who I voted for. Let's do it.
No, you could just spit it out if you want, but I've had some funny conversations with people in the industry who flat out hate Trump, but they also kind of say, business is good, so so they are kind of torn. But I mean, yeah, but it does seem like, but even outside of that, all kinds of fintech companies are booming. Robinhood, SoFi, like the whole industry just seems like on an upswing. Now, I want to kind of get back again to origins, because I think a lot of people wonder why companies like Koyfin, and you could extend this to TrendSpider and any other number of companies producing charts and data and things, is like, I think for people who don't know, why does anybody even buy this software? Because you open a brokerage account, they throw a bunch of software and tools at you. So can you kind of explain to people who are really unaware, why do people even bother with third-party software, let alone pay like hundreds of dollars a year or even a month?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of times the brokers are not really great at building software. I'd say it's kind of like a side business for them. And we talked about it before, just the ability to build good software. I think the brokers are really good at executing, at keeping your money safe and making sure that kind of the portfolio is what you have and access to trading. But when it comes to analytics, that's kind of not their focus, and it's not a trivial thing to solve. Back on Wall Street, I worked at my first job was at Goldman Sachs, and we had a whole division of engineers building software to use. And I can tell you that the software they built was always kind of not as good as the third-party providers, because with software you just need product managers and you need to have a lot of user input, and there's a whole life cycle of developing software that goes beyond just having a bunch of engineers coding. And for whatever reason, the very strong evidence and the observation is that banks on Wall Street and custodians and brokers on Main Street are just not good at building software. Doesn't mean that they don't have software, doesn't mean that they don't offer software, but it's not their core business. Their core business is something else. And so they're not kind of best of breed when it comes to analytics. And so it's it's one of these things where for some people it's okay to just have the software that the broker provides, but for other people that are that just need more data, more functionality, more analytics, more alerts, more screening tools, that's where Koyfin and others really kind of come in and fill a useful gap.
Okay, so how did you get good at building software then? You came from a traditional finance background, and working for big companies like Goldman Sachs, like totally different environment from a startup software company. So I guess a better way to ask it is, how did you figure things out?
I don't know, just very slowly, I guess. I think, for me, like my strength has always been just thinking about user interface and thinking about what makes sense, and kind of like what makes an intuitive product and how do you kind of put stuff together in an intuitive way. And so it's something that even when I was on Wall Street, we were creating presentations and reports for inside kind of an inside audience to try and convince the internally to invest in things, and also externally trying to convince clients to invest. And so we would use a lot of kind of charts and presentations, and it was really important in that job to try and present that in a very logical way. So there's a lot of kind of like bad ways of presenting data, of just dumping stuff on a page, and there's also an art of kind of highlighting certain things, of being able to put things in perspective. And I'd say that was kind of like my original experience or exposure to just making something that has a nice user interface. That was more in a presentation form. And then when I worked at Citigroup, for example, my team was responsible for implementing. We were one of the first clients of Palantir. And so when Palantir was kind of creating their, making their foray into Wall Street, my team was responsible for really thinking about what are the different dashboards and the different tools that we could create that would make some of the underlying technology that Palantir provided useful for traders. And so it all just comes with experience and trial and error. And I'd say learning slowly, but over years it adds up.
Oh man, you mentioned Palantir. Now I'm worried they're going to be listening, because I'm convinced they have eyes and ears everywhere. We at T3 we like to joke around about Palantir listening in. We have some people that are not big fans of the stock, but absolutely a fascinating. Absolutely a fascinating company. Okay, no, so I want to again wind back you, because I called it software development a nightmare. You said it's challenging. Now, if you had known everything that really went into it, do you think you'd still have done it? I mean, was being naive a benefit at the beginning?
I would not have done it if I knew everything I know today. That's for sure. I think that's kind of like the beauty of having an idea of being a startup founder is you really don't know how difficult the journey is, and you do it anyway. And sometimes it works out, other times it doesn't. I think a lot of it depends on the industry and luck, probably mostly luck. But working hard definitely doesn't hurt. When I was meeting with venture capitalists, kind of originally to fund Koyfin, to invest in Koyfin, I heard a lot of pushback in terms of saying we only invest in second-time founders. We prefer not to invest in first-time founders. I always was kind of hurt by that. I never understood that. But in retrospect, if I were to invest in startups, I probably would not invest in first-time founders, because you just make all those mistakes. You don't even know what you don't know. And that's just a recipe for losing money. And so it's definitely been hard. It's been super rewarding. I love my job today. I love what we've built. Very lucky to be where we are today. But definitely took some lucky turns for us to get to where we are today.
Oh, okay, so it looks like it took you about 2 years from founding the company to actually getting the product out the door. Was that originally the plan? Because I sort of look at these things like home improvement projects, where if you think it's going to cost like $5,000 in 2 weeks, it'll be like a month and $10,000. Like kind of nothing goes according to plan. So was 2 years the original plan, or did you think it'd go faster?
Yeah, I definitely thought it would go faster. I'd say Look, I literally made every single mistake that you can make. And so probably someone, if I had like a good technical co-founder, which, I would have loved to have, but just couldn't find anyone that wanted to go on this journey with me, it probably would have moved faster. But, we spent like 6 months developing the first iteration and we didn't have a designer. And when it started like coming out, I was just like, why does this look like crap? And our engineers would go, well, because like we don't have a designer. I'm like, what is a designer? What do they do? And so we hired a designer. And so I'd say kind of like making those really rookie mistakes originally cost us a bunch. We definitely got delayed on other things. I think the point you make in software development, things take longer than originally thought is just a standard in the industry. My friend Leo, who's also a startup founder, has told me he has a rule of pi. And I was like, what's the rule of pi? He's like, any estimate you get, just multiply it times 3.14. So if your developers say it's going to take 3 months, just multiply it times 3.14. So it's going to take about, a little over 9 months. And so a little bit facetious, but not far off the reality in terms of things just take longer to build, things go wrong, things crash, life happens. That's just the reality of what this is.
Okay, now you did say it was challenging dealing with venture capitalists, but you did raise money from, I see, Craft Ventures, Valor Equity Partners, social leverage. How did you actually get them to write the check then?
Yeah, social leverage on Howard Lindzen were kind of our first check, and they really took a bet on us. I'd say, we were lucky to just have passionate users in the beginning and just some traction, and kind of that launch in 2018 and 2019, we started seeing users grow. We started seeing kind of traction with retention, and that definitely had an impact on their investment. And so it's a really interesting kind of conversation in terms of getting a VC investment, what it takes, and stuff like that. I think with us, one thing going against us is we had not built a software company before, and just a lot of inexperience, which in retrospect is definitely was definitely valid that people had concerns about that. But we just kind of showed them with the usage metrics and the fact that people were actually using our product and we were solving a problem for them.
Okay, so like, what does it actually take to keep an application like Koyfin running? Like how big is your technical staff?
Yeah, so we have about 40 people today, and about 25 of those are engineers.
Wow. Yeah, I find it so fascinating how the more simple and elegant something is, the bigger the team is required to keep it that way. So as you look towards the future, okay, so I'll rephrase it. Let's say we could go in a time machine 10 years into the future. What do you want Koyfin to be then?
Yeah, what I see Koyfin in the future is the operating system for financial data. So what that means is we're going to have a base platform that ingests all this market data and really have an offering that tailors to the specific investor type. So whether it's a fundamental investor, financials advisor, a futures trader, an options trader, and we'll have packages and offerings for those workflows. And all those are going to work well together and then talk to each other. So that's something that I'm really proud of Koyfin, is we have different users today that are using kind of the common functionality that we have. And I think as we broaden and build Koyfin, we'll go deeper and deeper into those segments and really be able to solve problems for those users really well and really deeply.
Okay, since we're on this topic, and I'm free to put you on the spot, like are options prices coming to Koyfin?
They are. They definitely are. I love I love options, and so options are just an important part of the market in terms of having a view on volatility and what's expected. When we attack options, we want to have not only just the options prices, we want to have really robust and good data on volatility and all the Greeks. And that's one of the things that kind of like the reason we've been holding back is we just need to procure that data, get that data, figure out how it fits into Koyfin, but definitely we'll have options prices and Greeks.
Okay, so I have one more question before we wrap up. And guys, if you're enjoying this conversation, please like, comment, and subscribe. There's also a link to Koyfin down in the description below. So Rob, we have played the time machine game into the future. Now let's go into the past. If you could go back to 2016 and tell the younger Rob Koyfman, if you could give him one piece of advice before starting Koyfin, what would you say?
Find a technical co-founder.
Okay, so I guess anybody out there that is dreaming of starting a software company, find a technical co-founder. Okay, Rob, thank you for coming down with us. I really enjoyed the conversation. Have a wonderful day, and we wish you all the best at Koyfin.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michael.